Okay, I think we're getting here. So we're getting all set up. So everybody ready? Ready? I'm doing a new video this week. This is all right. So let's flip you around. Let's see here. Let me flip this around. Go down. Little micro adjustments. Okay. So this week's video is about trout fishing because Saturday. This is Thursday, or no? Is it Thursday? Yeah, this is Thursday. Um, April 20 something or another. Anyhow, so this is Saturday of this week is opening day of Michigan trout season. So I am bringing you out some lures. I'm gonna do probably some more videos like this because you got to see the kind of rod I set up with and what I'm using fishing line wise, pound test, the reels, and all that. So, without further ado, let's take a look at some of these trout killing lures here, and I'm going to put them in somewhat of an order. We're going to get rid of a couple of the baits first off because I don't use them very often. Let me see if I can crank this down a little bit. Okay, so the first lure and this is a lure that's kind of a specialty spinner for me. Most of these, what you see here, are all inline spinners. Reason I use inline spinners so much is because I can cover a lot of water with them. Um, I'm wading through small to medium sized streams, and I'm casting on my left, on my right, any holes or any log jams or structure and boulders that are to the left or right side of me, I'm casting at. Now, if I'm fishing side by side with a fishing buddy, then I generally fish on one side and my partner fishes on the other side. And if there's a hole on the right side and he's on the right side, he gets first cast into the hole. And then if there's a hole on my side, on the say the left side, then I'll cast over there. I get whatever side of the river the hole is on. You know, if you're fishing as a pair together, two guys side by side, whatever side the hole is on, if it's that person's side, they get the first cast in there. So just a little heads up on that. But if I'm fishing by myself, it doesn't matter. I just cast here, there, everywhere. So the first lure I'm going to show you is quite common. You can find them in most bait shops. Is a rooster tail spinner from Yakima Bait Company. Has a nice treble hook on it. Has a little feather dressing on there. I find the dressing on the hooks doesn't really matter so much with trout. I mean, they like them or they don't like them. I mean, they're still going to hit. If they're fired up and excited, they're going to grab it anyways. So this is a 1/4 ounce rooster tail spinner. Very specialty spinner. I don't use these very often. I use them in very deep, fast moving water because if you look at the blade on this, compared to some of the other spinner blades that I use more often, this has this long skinny blade, so that means that it spins closer to the body of the bait. This yellow body, it'll spin closer to that, so it stays down deeper. Now, if I'm fishing in 1.5 feet or 2 feet of water, a spinner this style would be hard to fish. I would have to go down to like the smallest size spinner like this that they make, which is I think a 16th ounce spinner. But I would have to go down to a much smaller spinner. I think this is probably I think this is a 1/16 ounce here. See, it's a little smaller spinner. But like I said, I don't use them very often just because I don't fish in a lot of like holes that are 5, 6, 7, 8 foot deep where I would need a bottom hugging spinner like that. Generally, the water I'm fishing in is usually um, quite quite shallow. You know, within, I mean, if it's above my knees or waist deep water, that's pretty deep for me. Another type of spinner that people I don't use as much is a MEP spinner. This is a MEPS Aglia spinner. And as you can see, it's got a fatter, rounder blade design to it. So this is going to ride a little higher up in the water column when you're reeling this in, unless you reel it in really, really slow, but then you could snag up. You always want to match the spinner size to the depth of water you're in and how fast the current is. The other thing you want to do that tosses those rules out is the simple rule that I do is I try to throw the biggest spinner I can get away with, providing the depth of the water, the conditions. The bigger the spinner I can throw, the better. Um, not saying I can't catch a 20-inch brown trout on a little number 00 or number 1 spinner like this. I can. That's very possible. But when you're throwing a much bigger bait, you're going to get bigger trout. You're going to get those 16 to 20, 22-inch fish on a regular basis with a bigger bait. So yeah, I don't use the MEP spinners either as much. They're kind of down here in this little category with the rooster tails. I use them. I tend to use these more on like smallmouth bass streams where I'm fishing. It's kind of the same operation. I'm using pretty much the same type of rod, little 5.5 foot medium. What they call a medium light or a light. I think it's a 5.5 foot light is what most of my rods are that I trout fish with. And the same rod's interchangeable when I go to a warm water stream for smallmouth bass, pike, walleye, that kind of thing, rock bass. So I tend to use the MEP spinners more for smallmouth bass fishing. They're a little cheaper, and if I snag them and lose them, it's not as hurtful as some of the other spinners that I have. Moving right along, another spinner that I do use and I do like quite a bit, especially for a beginner. Beginners, these are probably, if you're beginning new to trout fishing. Let me move these up out of the way because we're all done talking about those. If you're new to trout fishing or stream fishing, so probably the best spinner, and this is a spinner I started out on, is a Panther Martin. And Panther Martins have a unique design to them. The blade is actually attached to the shaft, the wire shaft there. It's actually attached right on there. With some of the other spinners, you'll see they'll have the shaft, and then they'll have this little clevis. This little horseshoe shaped thing that holds the blade in place. All right. Panther Martins don't go with that design. Their blade has got this concaved front and convex backside to it. So when this hits the water, it spins very easily. And that's what a lot of new people to trout fish in the stream have a hard time with, is being able to reel their spinner in fast enough to keep that blade turning. So Panther Martins are a good variety of spinner because they spin at a very slow speed. You can reel them in quite slow and they still spin beautifully. They also, like I said, they're easy for a beginner. Reason I don't use them so much anymore is because with this blade attached right on the body and the wire shaft of the spinner, this spinner will twist your line up really bad. I don't put swivels usually on my spinners, to remediate the twisted line problem, because that's just extra stuff out here. And trout have very good eyes, so I try to make the presentation so that they're not seeing a whole lot of extra stuff that they don't need to see. So that's why I tie directly my main line to my rod and reel. I tie directly right on the end of the spinner. So yeah, Panther Martins, like I said, they're fantastic for a beginner. I do get them because they're popular. Sometimes I'm out of town somewhere, and I go to a bait shop, and they may not have some of these other spinner varieties, but they most likely will have Panther Martins in that. So they're good. I use them. I just don't like them twisting my line up, because I cast constantly. I'm constantly moving when I'm doing that type of fishing with spinning tackle. I'm usually moving fairly fairly quick. I'm covering all the water. I mean, I've caught fish in some real tight little pocket areas in that. So sometimes it's hard to fish every little spot, but sometimes every little spot is successful and good. So moving along, we're going to one of my other primary spinners that I use. I throw these almost all the time. Um, they have a blade similar. That's a number 2. Let me get a number 3 so I can really show you, because that's primarily, I love number 3. Blue Fox Vibrex spinners. Okay. And this has a little bit, it's not as fat of a blade as like the MEP spinner. It's a little bit more tapered. And this runs in the water column a little deeper, but not so deep that it's going to snag on things. In a lot of situations, the Blue Fox Vibrex spinner like this is my favorite spinner to use. And I don't carry a huge amount of colors. I run gold. Gold is always my go-to size color spinner for these. I do go with copper. Copper is very good also. Copper is good because it's not very easy to find in a lot of bait shops. So you're going to a new stream, you're fishing there. Everybody has probably been throwing silver spinners, silver blades, and stuff like that. So the copper is just a little bit. It's not as common to in a lot of shops. You got to sometimes order these special, but the copper is good because it's a color that the fish don't see that often. So it's very effective. And like I said, in the Vibrex spinners, I carry 3s, 2s, and 1s. I used to carry number 0s, but they're a little too small for me. So I'll use a number 1 or a number 2 if the water's shallower, and I don't think I'm snagging too much with those sizes of spinners. The number 3, if the 3 is too heavy and I can't keep it from snagging up all the time, I'll go down to a number 2, or I'll go down to a number 1. So I kind of judge it, but I try to use the biggest spinner I can get away with. So if I can get away with a number 3 or a number 2 spinner, I'll use it. Just because, the trout go after bigger stuff. Another spinner that I use, and I don't use it that often, it's usually late in the summer, only because this spinner, it's by Joe's Flies. They're out of West Virginia, and it has a very large, fat, rounded blade, Colorado blade, they call this. The other ones that are on like the Vibrex would be like an Indiana style. But Joe's Flies are very effective because in the later part of the season, when the water levels drop down, the water might warm up a little bit. The fish might be a little bit sluggish. What's deadly about this is not only does this fly have this single hook, this big hook, but you have this little treble hook trailer back in there. I don't know if you can see it in there. Let me pull this back a little bit. There you go. You can see the treble hook trailer on the back. Very effective, because sometimes later in the season, in that shallower water that's a little warmer, those trout, they'll come up and they'll just kind of swipe at it. They won't really commit and grab the whole bait. So sometimes if they swipe at it, that treble hook will catch them. That'll be just enough to catch them. And I file all my hooks down. I file them on one side to sharpen them, kind of like this. I do the one side, and I flip the hook over like that, and I file the edge like that on the side. And then when I'm done, I just do the very tip. So it's like 3 sides, each side of the hook, and then the tip. And I'll file that just a little bit. And I make them sticky sharp. I want them hooks sticky sharp because most of the time when you lose a fish and they don't break the line and they just come unhooked, it's because of dull hooks. So dull hooks, bad. Gotta have them really sharpened up. Moving along here, a couple other Vibrex spinner colors that I like. is I don't sometimes go with these candy red blades. They still have some reflection from the the blade color underneath. This one's a silver, so it has a little bit of flash, but it just kind of tones it down a little bit. So if I don't have a choice, I'm running silver, or maybe silver is a good color that day. Sometimes I tone it down a little bit with a red blade like that, and you can buy them like this. For dirty water, um, trout fishing where the water's a little dirty, maybe we had some runoff, I'll use a Blue Fox Vibrex spinner. Um, this one has got a black body to it, and it's silver blade with that chartreuse yellow edge on the end. And for some reason, I discovered this spinner. For some reason, this works very good in dirty water because it's got that brightness of the chartreuse yellow color on here, the flash of the silver, and then it's got this black body which casts a shadow above the trout when they're sitting in a hole that's a little dirty. They see that shadow and that little bit of flash, and bingo bango, that gets them really well. They seem to like this color in dirtier water. And that's the one reason why I go with a silver, because silver is going to throw out the most flash. If I'm fishing dirty water, any of these other spinners would be fine in silver. All silver body, silver blade, they'd be fine because they're going to throw out the maximum amount of flash. In that dirty water, those fish can't see as good as they do when the water's clear. So that's the reason I use those. Like I said, silver is a common color. Everybody buys it in the bait store. And those fish get to the point that they see a lure a certain color all the time, and that's why I like using either the gold or the copper. Copper is really good on an overcast, cloudy day, in that it puts out just the right amount of flash for the light conditions, and it's deadly. So moving along over here, let's see. Let me see if I move this over. We talked about the Joe's flies. That's kind of a specialty fly, like I said. I like them. I'll use them even in higher water conditions sometimes because they pull out a lot of flash. They're actually good in dirty water too. If you get the Joe's fly with the silver blade and body, that one works real good in dirty water too. And you can kind of match it up with that other spinner with the black body over here for dirty water. You can use a darker brown, or you can go with, some of them come in a chartreuse or a real bright color. See, I told you these things catch things. They catch really good. Those hooks, when the fish gets that in their mouth, they're gone. But sometimes a white fly like that, or they have chartreuse, but that and a silver combination would be killer in dirty water. So talked mostly about spinners. The next thing I do cover and fish with quite a bit are crankbaits. These little minnow imitating crankbaits, like Rapellas. These are good. If you have a black and silver little 2-inch Rapella like this and a black and silver like this, these are great for trout, but you'll also catch a lot of smallmouth and rock bass and small pike in your warmer water streams. So these baits are dynamite for everything. That's kind of a great lure to buy that works on the trout, works on everything else in the other streams. They're warmer. I also get a lot of little Rapella and other minnow brand baits. They're kind of like in the brown trout color, because a lot of my trout streams, there's always browns in them. Most streams. Unless I'm just at an exclusive little brook trout stream in northern Michigan where, there's there might not be any other species of trout in there except for brook trout. But most Michigan streams have browns. They'll have sometimes brookies in them, and sometimes they'll have all three. They'll have rainbows, browns, and brookies. So whenever I can find a Rapella minnow bait like this that's colored either in rainbow trout, brown trout, mostly, those are good ones to pick up. Sometimes you can get a brook trout that's painted up like that on a minnow bait, but not very often. Just mostly browns and rainbows. Here's another variety of a brown color combination, kind of a white belly, but it's got the red and black little spots all over it. So that works good. And those are good. You can fish those, cast them upstream and just reel them back in, just like you would a spinner. Or you can cast them out if you got a little slower water, and if you got the total floating repeller or minnow baits like this, you can throw it out and you can just let it kind of drift slowly in the current if it's slower water and a little deeper, and you can just twitch it so it looks like a injured minnow on the surface, and that will trigger a bite. Another lures that I use, and several companies make these, are little crawdad or crayfish lures. Um, they come in a lot of different colors. I generally use these smaller ones because they're good for smallmouth bass streams and catching rock bass, but they also are great trout killers. They catch a lot of trout on these. Particularly if I'm fishing with crawdads for trout. I generally will use what's called the shed crayfish color. It's kind of like these colors. It's like a lighter tan, lighter in color overall, pretty much. And that replicates a crawdad that has changed and shedded out of its old shell, and it's a soft body. And trouts, for some reason, they know the color of a crawdad crawling along on the bottom that's got it just recently shed its old shell, and it's going to have that soft shell, and they're like potato chips for the trout. They just go crazy on them when they're like that. So I try to get colors that match that soft shell crawdad pattern, and trout go crazy for it. Sometimes you get them. This one I think is a Bass Pro Shop version of a crawdad crankbait, and it's got a little deeper lip, so this one will run a little deeper than the other ones I just showed you. But that works great. And like all the crawdad patterns, the crawdad swims with his tail, flipping his tail back and forth through the water. Okay, and his pinchers are always out in front, and so that's why these are such a realistic looking bait. They look just like a crawdad. When they're swimming, wobbling in the water, they work great. There's another one, little Rebel Baits makes a crawdad pattern. There's other people. I think this is a Bass Pro Shop knockoff version there, but you can get them. A lot of times, if I got deep enough water, I'll go to a crawdad this size, which is actually like twice or three times this, maybe, yeah, probably twice the size of these little guy. But I'll throw the bigger crawdad baits like this if I can get away with it, depending on how deep the water is, because this goes a little deeper than the smaller ones. But yeah, I'll throw a crawdad like this, and the bigger ones, because the big fish, big baits. And you'll catch little fish on a bait like this. I've caught trout that were maybe about twice the size of twice the length of this crawdad. I've caught trout that small on a big bait. So you're always going to catch small fish on big baits from time to time, but you're always going to catch big fish on big baits. So I use that. Now, another little secret weapon that I use. Now, Rebel makes a hard bait, like a crankbait like this, that looks like what I'm going to talk about next. I don't have one here, so I didn't have a chance to show you, but I'll show you another bait that's similar to what the crawdad the crankbait is, but it's in a jerk bait. And either one, the Rebel frog crankbait, or this little guy, little soft rubber frog like this, very deadly on trout. I use these. This is a specialty situation, and how I use this is I'm fishing through the stream. There'll be a big log jam right upstream of me, and I'll cast with spinners or other crankbaits to the back side, the downstream side of the log jam. Now, I could try to climb over the top of that log jam, but if I do that, I'm going to spook any fish that are in the front of the log jam. And that's usually the biggest and most aggressive trout are in the very front of the log jam. So my tactic is I climb out on the bank, I walk 10 yards at least, 10 yards half circle around where the log jam is, and I get myself about, I don't know, 20 to say 50 feet, even a little further upstream of where that log jam is. And I'll take either the Rebel frog crankbait or this little pop and frog, surface frog, and I'll cast it to the opposite side of the bank, upstream of the log jam. So I'm on the one side of the bank. I'm throwing this bait over to the other side of the bank as close as I can. And once it hits the water, I'm, like I said, I'm 50 feet at least upstream of the log jam. So this thing's floating on the water. It's going down and I'm feeding it line. I just want this thing to float all the way down until it gets about a foot away from the log jam. And then what I'll do is, if it's a Rebel crankbait frog, I'll just start cranking it in. I'll click the bail over and I'll just start slowly reeling it in, just letting it wobble back and forth out in front of that hole, and I'll retrieve it back upstream to me. Usually if I'm using that frog crankbait, they smack it right there. I mean, as soon as it starts moving, they're rushing out from under the log jam and grabbing it. With this guy, what I do is I let this get about a foot away from the log jam. It's free floating downstream. And then all of a sudden, when I get about a foot away upstream of the log jam, I click the bail and I just start popping this thing. I just kind of twitch it. This kind of goes across the top of the water, and these little legs are going bloop, ba-bloop, ba-bloop. And the big trout that are in that 16, 18, 20, 22 inch range, they can't resist this. They'll go after that, and that's the best way to fish the front end of a log jam. You could throw a spinner. You could come out but the thing is, to get a good accurate cast in front of a log jam with a spinner, you're running the risk of spooking anything in front of the log jam. That's why I get far upstream and I use a top water bait like this. And the frog is good because it just floats down the river, down to the front of the log jam, and that frogs jump in the river and just kind of float and drift with the water anyways. So it's a very natural presentation for fawning the front of a log jam. I could do the same thing with a Rapella, a minnow bait. I could throw this out, let it float down, and then just start twitching it once I get in front of the log jam. And that would work, but not too often do you see fish just swimming right on the surface, unless they're wounded, that are doing that. So the frog, I think, triggers them a lot better. I could do the same thing with a crawdad, but crawdads usually don't float down the river on the surface and then just start all of a sudden wiggling and moving. So that's the thing with the crawdad crankbaits. If you're going to cast them and just reel them in, or even the Rapella, the minnow baits, you cast them out. You got to cast them a little further and past where you expect a fish to be, because you want to get that thing working first. When it hits the water, if it hits right where you think the fish is going to be, it's not gonna work so well for you. It'll spook the fish. So you try to cast a little bit further upstream of them with some of these baits, even the spinners, and get the thing working good as it's coming back to you, and bring it along the side where the fish would be holding. So anyways, it's almost 30 minutes. I didn't want to make a video this long, but I'm gonna cut it out right now, and hope you enjoy it. Like, share, subscribe, comment. I'm going to have probably some more fishing videos like this. Maybe something outside where I can do some demonstrations with the way I cast and the type of rod and everything, where I got some more open room to set up a camera and walk around it. But anyhow, hope you enjoyed this one. I'm going to have probably some Indian artifact videos coming up in the near future, but I'm going to be pretty busy for the next couple of weeks. So I don't know how often I'll have a video out. But anyways, hope you enjoy and have a good one.